Which players have fallen the most in dynasty value over the last month? We're talking about that in today's video. As always, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. If you like dynasty content, help us get to 1,100 subscribers and join our Discord. Link is in the description. It is free. We're building up a little bit of community. You can post trade questions, join our live streams where we do rookie mock drafts, team reviews, all that stuff. And we're going to put together some listener leagues as well. So today we're talking about dynasty fallers. You see the video that we already put out in Dynasty Risers a couple of days ago. Well, today we're talking about fallers. And as always, we're talking about the starting off with the quarterback position, and we're starting off with Mr. Jordan Love, who's fallen 3 spots. Generally, with quarterbacks and Superflex, there's not a whole lot of movement, especially during the offseason because not a lot's happening. With these players, they're not playing games. Jordan Love has fallen from 9 to 12. And he kind of falls into this giant bucket of players who they don't do much with their legs. And because of that, I think we can overrate some guys. They're not difference makers at the position. Could they have a season where they are difference makers? Sure. But can you consistently rely on them? I'm not 100% sure of that. It's guys like CJ Stroud, Bo Nix, Jordan Love, Baker Mayfield, Brock Purdy's in there, Trevor Lawrence. Like, can these guys in any given game give you production on the ground? Sure. But is it part of their game? No. And are they going to be consistent enough, like a Joe Burrow, to be in that top tier because they can do it with their arm? Not necessarily. I mean, even the best quarterback in the NFL, Patrick Mahomes, has kind of been unreliable for fantasy the last couple of years. And so, Jordan Love's kind of at the top of that tier. Even though he did fall a little bit, he's still near the top of that tier. So to me, he's a tier down target, like, a guy that I want to tier down off of and go and get another quarterback that I think in any given season can be just as productive as Jordan Love, and I get extra assets. He's an interesting one with Love because, like, something that I found interesting with, if you kind of go and look at his game logs this year, the first 7 games of the year for Jordan Love, his first 7 games of the year, he threw the ball more than 30 times, 5 of his first 7 games. 34, 54, 26, 32, 33, 22, 39. So 5 of his first 7 games, he threw for over 30 passes a game. He did that once in his last 8 games, I believe it was, because he missed a few. 17, 23, 28, 20, 27, 28, 30. And 12 in the last game of the year, and then in the playoff game he put up over 30. So is that kind of telling of what they want to do with their offense? They want to be more of this run first kind of guy. Like Josh Jacobs was getting 30 plus carries, a game and stuff like that to end the year. And is that kind of what they want to do? It's interesting to me because he's a little bit of a gunslinger. I know he didn't throw an interception his last 7-8 games, but he was also not throwing it as much. He was throwing a lot of interceptions at the beginning of the year. I don't know. It's just with Love. Like, I think he's a good quarterback. Could he have a year where he has, like, a top 7 quarterback season? Sure. But I think if you average it out over the next several seasons, he's probably just a low-end QB1, and he falls into this giant bucket of guys, kind of like the next guy, Brock Purdy, who's fallen from 14 to 16. Now, Purdy's a little bit further down that list. Still maybe a guy that I want to tear down off of, but he's like right in the middle. If he goes lower, then he's a guy that I want to go from Jordan Love to Brock Purdy and pick up some extra pieces. I guess the only concern with Purdy is that I'm not 100% convinced the 49ers are going to want to pay him as their quarterback of the future. And when I say that, I mean, are they really going to be paying him, top tier quarterback money? If you look at the quarterback contracts and what they're making, Dak, $60 million a year. Burrow, 55. Jordan Love, 55. Lawrence, 55. Tua, 53. Goff, 53. They're going to have to pay Brock Purdy $50 million a year. And I kind of have this sneaky feeling that, like, Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers potentially think that his system is more what made Brock Purdy, and that they're better off finding another guy to fit into that system and save that money to be able to spend it elsewhere. It's just kind of a gut feeling I have. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle it. I think they're going to start talking about it this offseason. And, you know, as long as he's on the 49ers, though, like Purdy has the potential to be, a low end QB1, just like all these other guys. And then finally, Jared Goff. And Jared Goff has fallen 4 spots. I think a lot of that's because of the Ben Johnson leaving. I don't necessarily, I'm not too worried about Ben Johnson leaving because a lot of the pieces are still there. The offensive line being a big one. That offensive line is still one of the best, if not the best in the NFL, right up there with Philly. That's really a key to their success. The run game is still there. Amon-Ra is still there. Jameson Williams is still there. So I do think it's interesting. They did go out and, they went their offensive coordinator is coming from Sean Payton, and I think it was his passing games guy or quarterback coach. And I think that's quite interesting. I thought that maybe they were going to stay in-house and promote from within. So I will be interested to see, because generally when you see guys switch coordinators, especially guys who've had the same coordinator for multiple years, there is a dip in production in the beginning of the season and stuff. So I still believe Goff's going to be pretty good because of all the weapons that are still there. So he's a guy that I'm looking to tear down too. If I can get a huge haul and go from Jordan Love to Jared Goff, I'm probably going to do it, if I can get a huge haul, right? Because the fact of the matter is, like, Jared Goff's probably still going to be, if you average it out over the next 2-3 seasons, what's going to be the difference between Goff and Love's numbers? Probably not a whole lot. And we got to stop playing fantasy beyond a 2-3 year window, Dynasty specifically. So he's these guys in that range of guys that I want to tear down to and pick up a haul in return if possible. Into the running backs, Kyren Williams. Again, not a whole lot of change here at the running back position, and I try not to use the same guys month to month. So I try to use different guys than the previous month's video. I put these out, by the way, at the beginning of every month, right around the beginning of every month. Kyren Williams is interesting because should he be is he kind of undervalued in Dynasty and in fantasy in general? The guy was the RB2 in points per game in 2023 behind only Christian McCaffrey. He was the only running back in half PPR to average more than 17 points per game. Besides McCaffrey, of course. It was McCaffrey and then Kyren. And Kyren averaged basically 20 points per game. And that's pretty rare, guys. There's not many guys. No one in 2022 averaged 20 points per game. Only one player in 2021 averaged 20 points per game. So it's not very common. And then this year he comes back and follows it up with averaging 8 points per game. But we still we're still kind of low on him. If his name was Breece Hall, he would potentially be the RB1, right? He potentially would be the RB1. Over the last 2 seasons, he's been better than Bijan. He's been better than Achane, than Breece Hall, guys like that who he's ranked below. So again, they're all kind of in that same tier, and I get it. Maybe we need, I think people are worried about his rookie year and him doing nothing. I believe, he doesn't have a contract right now. A long-term contract is what I mean. He's with the Rams 1 more year, but you can make an argument that he should be ranked over a lot of these other guys, like a Breece Hall. He's on a better system. He's produced more than these guys. He's just as young as them. He's not that much older than them. And yet we still have him down at the bottom of that tier, which is it's kind of interesting to me. Isaiah Pacheco has fallen from 17 to 21. And I get it because, Pacheco, has not looked good since coming back from that leg injury. He broke his leg and came back in whatever it was, 8 weeks, 8 weeks. And we kind of expected him to not look very good. And the Chiefs basically said we got to use Kareem Hunt because Pacheco's not the same. Does that mean that Pacheco's going to suck next year? Not necessarily. Can you buy low on him? Maybe. Although I am a little bit hesitant. Pacheco's just one of those running backs who you take on a year-to-year basis. And the Chiefs could very well bring in another running back in this heavy and deep running back draft class and kind of replace Pacheco, in my opinion. Will he still have a role for the team? I think so. I think he will, as long as he doesn't get injured. And I think he's a solid player. But beyond 2025, I'm not very excited about Pacheco in general. I thought his playing style and, just it was going to be a very short stretch of like good production from Pacheco. And even then, like the nature of the offense that they run and how they use their running backs, like Pacheco is kind of a touchdowner dependent type of player. Like even when he was really good last year, putting up points and stuff, like he probably caught more passes than to be expected. He caught 44. But a lot of it was like he needed the touchdown to really solidify a really good game. Like, Pacheco only rushed for over 100 yards last year 3 times. I think we kind of in our mind, we had it as a little bit more. So kind of an interesting one. I'm not really buying running backs in this range as of right now. I'll buy guys that are ranked a little bit lower just because I am a little bit worried about this draft class coming in. Rachaad White is another one that's fallen from 34 to 39. I think part of it is because the Liam Cohen news and moving on and all of that. Are they going to move on to just full on Bucky Irving? There's a possibility they do. That being said, like Rachaad White wasn't that bad this year. And I do think he's a pretty talented pass catcher. In his career, he averages 7.5 yards per reception. And over the last 2 years, he's averaged even more than that. 8.2 yards per reception over the last 2 years. His rookie year, he averaged 5.8. But then in 2023, 8.6 and 7.7. That's like legit usually the better receiving backs are averaging 7.5 plus per reception, eight per reception. You look at McCaffrey in his career, who's one of probably the best pass catching running back we've had over the last 5 years, 8.5 per reception. You look at a guy like Austin Eckler, for example, when he was doing his thing, he was averaging, 10 at the beginning of his career and then 7.5, 9.2, 8.5. So like, he's a legit pass catcher in my opinion, and I don't think he's going to necessarily lose that role in Rachaad White. I think he's going to be a pretty good player. He might be hard to rely on, but like, am I buying him? No. Am I selling him? Probably not. He's just kind of a hold at this point. He's a hold at this point, and kind of just see where it goes, because we've seen him at least be good when he gets the volume, and maybe he gets that. If something happens to Bucky Irving. By the way, Bucky Irving, 8.3 yards per reception, who's also very good at catching the ball. Last running back here, Tank Bigsby from 25 to 30. I don't really know what to say here. I think a lot of people are going to be like, oh, Liam Cohen's in here. He made both Rachaad White and Bucky Irving, fantasy studs and difference makers. So ETN and Bigsby must be. My one word of like, I'd be a little bit cautious in that he's going to want guys that fit his system. And so do Tank Bigsby and ETN fit his system? I don't know. And so I would be just a little bit hesitant there. I'm more confident that ETN is going to be good than I am Bigsby, just because of the relationship with Trevor Lawrence. And they still, even though it wasn't Cohen and this GM, there's still first round draft capital invested in him. And so I think there's that kind of thought process, like, hey, we got to get what we can out of him. But I wouldn't just automatically think like, oh, Tank is going to be the Rachaad White or the Bucky Irving and vice versa. So I lean towards ETN just because, one, his relationship with Lawrence, and two, his pass catching ability. And we just haven't really seen much of a pass catching. Tank Bigsby's caught 8 passes his first 2 years. So I would be a little bit hesitant, and I would probably sell on Tank Bigsby right now if I can get even RB30 value for him. Into some wide receivers, we have Jackson Smith and Jigba, who has fallen a little bit from wide receiver 9 to 12. And I kind of posed this. We put out a Dynasty price check on JSN and kind of just said, like, is he kind of at his peak? Is JSN at his peak? Can we see him getting higher than the wide receiver 12, accounting for other rookies coming in and things like that? Like, if you actually look at the numbers, JSN, he finished overall as the wide receiver 12, right? But in points per game, he was the wide receiver 22. So, like, it's the fact that he didn't miss any games, which pushed him to the wide receiver 12. But his production wasn't necessarily like winning you leagues and things like that. It was low end wide receiver 2 stuff. Now, are they going to change the offense? They're definitely going to change the offense in Seattle. Are they going to throw as much? I don't know. Do we see the quarterback situation getting much better? I don't think so. So there's some things where you can kind of point to and be like, hey, like JSN's a good player. He's a good piece for a team wanting to win. But like, also, is he at his peak? And there's a very, very good chance that he is at his peak. That he's, he never gets higher than the wide receiver 12 or the wide receiver 9 and stuff like that. So I think it's interesting with JSN. Like, to me, he is kind of a tier down type of, tier down to someone else off. Like, if I can get Roma Dunze plus, Roma Dunze in a first or something, I would happily do it. I like JSN a lot. I'm one of the biggest JSN guys. Now, if they move on from DK Metcalf, that could be a little bit different. But the fact is, DK Metcalf, there's a good chance he's still there. And, DK Metcalf is a legit, other wide receiver there. Maybe JSN is a little bit more of a target hog, but, DK Metcalf is still another guy there that's going to compete for production. Jordan Addison is another one. And I guess, like, my thinking here is like JSN and Jordan Addison. Is there a whole lot of difference between the two, right? Is there a whole lot of difference between the two? And I think most people would say yes. That being said, Addison's been better than JSN their first 2 years in the league, right? Jordan Addison last year in 2023, this is half PPR, averaged 11 points per game, was the wide receiver 28 in points per game, and the wide receiver 21 in total points. Jackson Smith-Njigba, wide receiver 48 in total points, and the wide receiver 60 in points per game, averaging 7 points per game. Okay, 2024, Jackson Smith-Njigba, wide receiver 10 overall, wide receiver 22 in points per game in half PPR. Jordan Addison, wide receiver 20 overall, wide receiver 21 in points per game. So Addison in points per game was better than JSN this last year. He averaged 0.2 more points per game, more. And that's interesting to me because I don't think we think of those two guys as the same. I think we think of JSN with more potential and upside, and maybe that's true. But over the first 2 years, guys who basically went, back to back with those guys, and in Addison, Johnston, or maybe Flowers was in there. They all went within five picks or so, those 4 wide receivers from last year. And Addison has been better the first 2 years, even though he's playing with Justin Jefferson across from him. So it's interesting to me. I think Addison's kind of where he should be ranked. And maybe we should think of JSN a little bit more in this light. I'm not saying he should necessarily be ranked here. And I know JSN took a step up this year and all of that, but I don't think there's much difference between those two players. And I think they're probably more wide receiver 2s than anything else. And so that's kind of where the whole logic of like, should we trade high on JSN? Because should he be more in this range? I think Addison's properly ranked. This is where he's at. He's never going to be the best wide receiver on his team as long as Justin Jefferson's there, but he does have injury upside with Jefferson. And we've seen him still produce as a wide receiver 2, even with Justin Jefferson alongside of him. And the quarterback situation that we were worried about. 2 more wide receivers here. Cooper Kupp from wide receiver 47 to 51. Obviously, he asked for, or he's going to be traded potentially, or seemingly he's going to be traded. I still think, what's funny with Cooper Kupp is, and I was talking about this during the season, up until Cooper Kupp completely tanked in the playoffs, which was the goose egg in week 15, from week 1 to week 14, the regular season, fantasy regular season, Cooper Kupp was the wide receiver 5 in points per game. The wide receiver 5. Now, he missed games, so his total points weren't quite there, but he averaged 14.9 points per game through the first 14 weeks of the season. He averaged more points than Amon-Ra St. Brown, T. Higgins, CeeDee Lamb, Terry McLaurin, A.J. Brown, and then he just was terrible to end the year. And that leaves a sour taste in everyone's mouth. At the end of the year, he had 0, 3.9, and 3.4 he was horrendous to end the year. But like, I know he's getting older and all that stuff. He's so low in the rankings where I'm willing to take a shot on him just because, like, can he still sneak out a top 15 wide receiver season if he gets on the right team? You know, he's around guys like Marvin Mims, Romeo Dobbs, Rashad Bateman, Quentin Johnston. Like, give me Cooper Kupp and the chance of him being, you know, even a wide receiver 2 next year. I'd be very surprised if any of those guys that I just listed were wide receiver 2s next year. And like, I'll take the upside potentially of Cooper Kupp of one more year and kind of get him as a throw-in piece, because I think you could potentially get him as a throw-in piece. And finally, we have Keon Coleman, who's fallen from 31 to 37. I wasn't the biggest Keon Coleman guy last year. I didn't like the separation metrics for him, and he was kind of a contested catch guy. It's a little bit unfortunate because, like, I feel like Keon Coleman was just starting to get going when he got injured and missed 4 weeks. And I feel like that kind of messed up his production a little bit. But that being said, like, I'm not just super optimistic about what the future of Keon Coleman is. Is he going to be just kind of like Gabe Davis in this Bills offense potentially? Are they going to try and bring in a number one weapon? I think so. They tried to kind of do it with Cooper Kupp, and that didn't work out. They don't seemingly have it with guys like Kincaid and Shakir. You know, nice supplemental pieces, but number one guys. I'll be interested to see if the Bills try to bring in like a legit number one weapon here. I'm just not the biggest Keon Coleman guy. He had more than 5 or more catches once this year. He only went over 75 yards once this year, or over 70 yards once this year. So I don't know. He's a good player. I think he fits their offense and helps their offense, but I just don't think he's going to be that difference maker that we wanted him to be potentially. And then 2 tight ends here. We have Eric All. We did get news that Eric All is going to miss the rest of he had a setback. He's going to miss the rest of he's going to miss the entire 2025 season. This was the issue with Eric All. I know people really liked him. He just couldn't stay healthy in college. It makes it a little bit interesting with the Bengals because, like, I think a lot of their tight ends are free agents this year. I'm just going to double check that, but I think it's Mike Gesicki is a free agent. Eric All is going to miss the entire year. Here it is. We have Tanner Hudson, Mike Gesicki, and Cam Grandy are all free agents for the Bengals. And then Eric All is going to miss the entire 2025 season. And so you're looking at, well, who do they have on their roster? Drew Sample, who's been there for a couple of years. And then Tanner McLaughlin. Keep an eye on him. Tanner McLaughlin, they drafted him last year, I think in the 6th round, a couple rounds after Eric All. And I kind of have him as a deep dynasty stash. He was, I believe, he was on their practice squad most of the year, didn't do anything, but just someone to potentially stash, like, with all the injuries and free agents that they have. And then Will Dissly from 35 to 39. Not a whole lot of movement in the top 20 or so for tight ends, which makes sense. Will Dissly has fallen. I think we got we saw what relying on Will Dissly will get you. Like, I think we got the most out of him that we could was this last year. He had a career year, I believe, in all statistics and things like that. He had 50 catches, 481 yards, and 2 touchdowns. It just makes you think, like, man, if they get a legit tight end for the Chargers, like, what could that tight end do? So that was it, guys. That is the Dynasty Risers. Again, make sure to followers, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video.